Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of EmanCodes. If you're new to this channel and this is your first video, welcome to EmanCodes. Here we learn about DevOps, we learn about cloud, and we learn about software development. So if you're looking to go into the industry, I feel like this is something that you should definitely have on your subscribe list, and subscribe, like. This is going to be more of a talk conversation about cloud in general. So there's not going to be any coding within this particular video. So grab your tea or coffee and let's get right into it. So today's topic, we're going to talk about cloud is going vertical. We're going to dive into exactly what kind of going vertical means within cloud, essentially, and really kind of understand the ins and outs of cloud in kind of like the smallest conversation that we can have as possible. We'll go through the context quickly. So I can see from the context, we'll start off by doing a recap on what cloud is. We'll then go into what cloud looked like during the pandemic, and then what cloud looked like post-pandemic era. And then we'll talk about cloud goes vertical, which is a new momentum concept or new trend which is happening. And then we'll quickly touch on my personal opinion on what I think will happen to cloud in the next 5 to 10 to 15 years time. And then we'll end the presentation. So hopefully you learned something, and please like and subscribe. Also leave your comments below of what you want to talk about, or if anything that you want to discuss. I'll be more than happy to kind of get into a topic with individuals who are as enthusiastic about cloud and about software and about tech as I am. So let's do a quick recap on what is cloud. Now, previously in my other videos, I actually did a talk on cloud, and I thought, once again, if you're new, it's best that we actually speak about it in a non kind of technical format so you can fully understand what cloud is. Now, previously, back in the day, if you wanted to launch a business, you needed to have a range of servers, which are essentially computers sitting in kind of empty spaces where you can, if someone were to visit your website on a computer or make an order to your computer, to your product, for example, they'll then have to find you'll then give them your domain name, which is your website. They will type that in, it will take them to your website. They can make demands, they can purchase things from there. Now, if, for example, one day you had 500 people visit your site, and then the next day you had 10,000 people visit your site, you may think to yourself that maybe I need to increase the amount of servers that I have. And so, as you can see in the image here, you would have basically a room full of computers, and then individuals would be able to go ahead and will be able to kind of visit your site. You can house your websites on there. Now, switching to kind of 2022 era, we have cloud computing. With cloud computing, if you need to start a business, if you need to start something, you literally just go on any cloud provider, AWS, GoDaddy, GCP, Azure. You kind of rent computing power, which is essentially servers that you don't manage yourself. And because of concepts like Elastic Beanstalk or ECS, essentially you were able to essentially host your application on there. And because things like load balancing, also it can allow you to scale your website or scale your applications to meet demand. So like I described, if, for example, one day you had 500 people in your visiting your site, or 10,000 people tomorrow, you can scale to meet these business demands at a much more efficient cost to your business. And of course, cloud nowadays, which is why we want to talk about cloud going vertical, because of this up and down scaling and the fact that you're housing your infrastructure within cloud, there's a lot of analytics, APIs, and also softwares which have now become readily available to allow you to also understand what your customers want. And this information is actually provided by the cloud providers in order that you can actually easily see trends within the customers that are actually coming through. Now that you kind of understand what cloud is, of course, everything has a disadvantage and an advantage. And one of the disadvantages of cloud, which is actually a very small disadvantage, and it's my own personal opinion of one of the disadvantages of cloud, is something known as vendor locking. Now, I mentioned there are cloud providers like AWS, which is Amazon, GCP, which is Google, Azure, which is Microsoft, and GoDaddy, which is an independent one also. What can happen is, a lot of time with companies, they can end up having just one cloud provider or one cloud vendor providing them the cloud services, where they will house all their infrastructures, all their kind of applications. What could happen is that you can become so reliant on one vendor or one cloud provider that if in the most unlikely event they were to have a problem, maybe a flooding or a dramatic spike in pricing. I mean, let me just firstly mention that this is probably a scenario which may or may not happen, but in such a situation, you're locked into that one particular vendor. If you can't access your application or your infrastructure, then what do you do from there onwards? So that's one of the disadvantages. Of course, it's quite easy to combat that, which is, for example, yes, you can have your application housed within one cloud provider, e.g. AWS, GCP, or Azure, completely up to you depending on your business needs. You can also have a backup because of things like Terraform, for example, which is a great infrastructure as code, and it's also cloud agnostic. Agnostic meaning that I will actually do a tutorial on Terraform. I've got a small tutorial on Terraform already on my site, on my channel, but Terraform is cloud agnostic, which means that you can have a script which, if you decide to launch that script within AWS, within GCP, or within Azure, it will then create your infrastructure. So whatever you require, say you want 10 servers or 10 computers, Terraform will be able to allow you to provision these and install your application on there and run it. So because of things like these tools, it does avoid that vendor lock-in, or it gives a workaround to that. So that's the recap on cloud. We can now go into the topic and really approach what's been going on within cloud of late. So let's talk a little bit about what was going on within cloud computing during the pandemic. So cloud during the pandemic was a very, very interesting time. The first thing we saw was an increased acceleration of companies to cloud adoption. Now, picture this, for example, it's during the pandemic, companies are no longer able to work within the office and they have to now work from home. At the same time, there was statistics showing that during 2020, 2021, we saw a major increase in public spending of around 167 billion times, 167 billion spent more than usual. Now, so what's happened is people were working from home, people were not allowed to go to kind of retail stores to actually buy things. However, companies were seeing more traffic on their sites than never before. So how would companies then respond to this almost increased burst of customer interaction, increased burst of customer reliance on them? The best way to do that was to look at cloud as a solution. Microsoft essentially stated that they saw 2 years of digital transformations in 2 months. Now that statement speaks quite powerfully. If you digest that and you break that down, what that essentially means is that within the time period of the pandemic, numerous companies were adopting cloud at a much more quicker rate than they actually expect to do so. And the main reason for this is because of the fact that why companies were actually adopting cloud as a solution. A lot of companies showed that they had business reliance on themselves. A lot of companies essentially wanted to have that competitive edge, and so if their competitors were doing it, they might as well get ahead of the competition and also adopt cloud. Hence why we saw such an increase amount of companies actually adopting cloud. Now it brought a huge opportunities for kind of companies to grow and to meet demand. At the same time, it removed certain things from companies' costs. For example, companies no longer needed to have servers which they would have to then worry about management of these servers, patching, security. This was kind of business tasks or IT tasks that could be offloaded and given to essentially given to business to cloud providers instead. Now let's talk about what cloud actually looked like post-pandemic era. So what we've seen post-pandemic era, even outside of the whole technological development and cloud development, is that companies are now seeing just how important IT departments are to the function of the business. It's seen an increase whereby IT departments is seen as what enables team, and board executives and leadership teams are able to now prioritize decisions on technology strategies. Now there's going to be a lot more, essentially a lot more cloud development happening, which is really important, especially now that we are in a post-pandemic era. Companies which have integrated themselves into cloud are finding that as much as they are more efficient and as much as they are more nimble, there is more that they can do. And so there's essentially cloud vendors are finding ways to provide not just cloud services to companies, but to essentially solve those issues that companies would normally have, business would normally have, that would take them away from essentially providing competitive advantages for their businesses. And we're going to dive into a little bit of that in a concept which is quite new, and it's known as cloud goes vertical. Now, as I mentioned, the post kind of pandemic era is seeing companies looking to become more nimbler and more efficient. And one way that companies are doing that, which is where cloud goes vertical is such an interesting concept, is that a lot of the business processes that companies are currently doing, which don't actually provide them a competitive advantage. For example, within the office, for example, there may be admin tasks, or there may be daily tasks of, I guess, looking at information from a site and then taking that information and putting that, I guess, into some type of Excel sheet. These are business tasks, internal business processes, which are not exactly competitive. However, these tasks do take manpower, and so one which cloud is looking to combat that is that cloud vendors as well as software vendors are providing common use case solutions for businesses, which is allowing the industry to be more vertical. So, for example, this particular scenario I've talked about, where, say, on a Monday morning, the company needs to check the price of a particular product to match against their own product, and it requires someone physically looking around on the web, searching these things and then updating a particular sheet. What companies are now able to do, for example, is to go into any cloud vendor, for example, and find an API or a tool. When I say an API, what that means essentially is that a company may write a software solution, and by the use of API, companies can then plug that particular piece of code into their own softwares and build on top of that. So because of this, companies are able to go into the cloud and find solutions which are more common use cases and actually build on top of that and allow them to be more efficient. What actually that happens is that when companies are able to then take on these tools and build on it, right? It then actually allows them to no longer worry about managing these internal business processes, but rather offload that work into the cloud. By doing that, also it allows them to then focus manpower and resources into those side of their business, which will allow them to be more competitive. So, for example, developing a better product, developing a better software, developing, I guess, a better customer care. By having these ability to then transfer resources there, they can actually then have a much more better competitive advantage over, I guess, their competitors. Now, if you think about it, within cloud, there is when a company grows their cloud infrastructure vertically, it's also quite different from when a company grows their cloud infrastructure horizontally, especially when it comes to scaling up and down. If a company was to scale horizontally, what that essentially means is that they are employing a number of different and more servers or resources, for example. So instead of having one server with, I guess, 10 times the capability, they can employ 10 servers, and each server will deal with one specific task. And if a company was to grow vertically, they would have one server and it would give that particular server more memory, more CPU. And so with cloud goes vertical, it just means that when companies are employing the services within cloud, they're able to take on, as well as employing these services that cloud provide, they're able to offload some of their own internal processes into the cloud and utilizing some of these new softwares or these new capabilities that cloud vendors are providing for them. One of the actually quite interesting thing that AWS actually provides as an AWS cloud systems engineer, AWS actually provides DynamoDB, which is a form of database. Now within that also, it allows them to analyze certain aspects of their database in very, very interesting ways, which it's worth talking about, and I'll actually make a video or doing a demonstration on DynamoDB and how companies can actually benefit off that particular tool. And so in a high level, this is how companies are actually going vertical, and it's actually, I think it's quite interesting to see what the next couple of years will genuinely look like. I mean, we are at the moment in a very technological era where there's talks of new things coming out, quantum computing, Web3, which is kind of sketchy at the moment. But in my personal opinion, where do I see tech and cloud and future of cloud going in the next 5, 10, 15 years? I think what we'll see especially is that there's going to be more and more cloud providers entering the market, and that's for sure. I think as much as there are companies entering the market, there's going to be an increase of softwares which are solving the common business use cases, which will then make businesses more efficient. And so competition between businesses are going to increase. Companies are going to be able to meet the demands of their customers much better. But I also do believe that the complete reliance and importance on cloud companies is going to require, I guess, in some small way, is going to require these cloud vendors companies to be much more efficient. I mean, they are providing efficiency for businesses, but then how do they manage efficiency within themselves? That's going to be quite interesting. If they themselves, if the cloud vendors, so AWS, GCP, Azure, these companies then become inefficient due to the fact that they're providing efficiency for other companies and not able to do it for themselves, we could see a slowing down in the capabilities of these cloud vendors. So I guess in the next 10 to 15 years time, I think what will happen is there will be external companies who are then providing more efficiency for these huge cloud vendor providers. Well, that's it for today. I hope you've learned a little bit more about cloud and how companies are employing the use of cloud within their own environments. And I hope that's something that you're interested in, and I hope you had a great joy learning something about it also. We're gonna, and the next videos are gonna be more of kind of more the coding style, looking at a piece of code, analyzing that code, looking at cloud infrastructures, trying them out for ourselves also, and kind of seeing what we can learn from there. But thank you very much for your time today. Like and subscribe, leave comments as to what you think will happen in the next 5, 10, 15 years time. I would love to really know your thoughts also on it. My name is Emmanuel. This is EmanCodes, and I hope you have a lovely Saturday, rest of your Saturday. Thank you.